real. His crotches were still rested against that dining table where we were talking. He was still suffering a lot of pain from the injury. He couldn't stand on that leg. It was just a few days after, and you heard there what a lot of people I think talked about at the time and still talk about, some of those what ifs. If something could have been done, if one of them had done something else, even with the heroism that so many people showed that day, whether that could have changed the course of events. We know, for example, from what people told us, that Axel Rudakubana initially went down a different driveway, not down towards the heart space where the attack ultimately took place. What if someone had been able to stop him? I know a lot of people think about that, those who live on Hart Street, those who work there, but also the fact that even then, definitely then, they were still processing what had happened and the trauma of what they'd seen, and many of them still are. When you talk to people on Hart Street today, that day is still very much in their minds. Those vivid colours of summer have gone. It's faded. It's winter time, of course. The pink ribbons on the gateposts and the trees and the lampposts are still there, but they're faded. But those memories certainly haven't. And for people who still relive those moments very clearly in their minds, when we talk about them, it feels, some of them for the first time, many of them were inside the cordon for a number of days and didn't see all of the global spotlight on their street. And for many of them, it clearly is still very difficult confronting those memories. And for many of them, I think that they know that will live forever, even when this process is over and the focus on Southport and Hart Street has gone away. It's clearly very difficult for them. And for many of them, of course, there was the prospect of coming here to Crown Court to give evidence, to relive all of that in front of a jury in the very dry surroundings of a Crown Court. There will be relief, I know, amongst many of them who don't have to come and do that. The strain of that, it was clear for many of them, was very real. The prospect of having to do that, the change of Axel Rudakubana's pleas today, mean that won't now need to happen, and there will be relief, of course, as well as wanting to see justice being done in this case, particularly for those 3 young girls who died and the others who were injured and those who witnessed what happened.
Oh, sorry, I might go on you. Axel Rudakubana has today pleaded guilty to the murder of Elsie Stancombe, B.B. King and Alice de Silva Aguirre, as well as the attempted murder of 10 others, including Leanne Lucas and John Hayes. This was an unspeakable attack, one which has left an enduring mark on our community and the nation for its savagery and senselessness. At the start of the school holidays, a day which should have been one of carefree innocence, of children enjoying a dance workshop, Rudakubana carried out his meticulously planned rampage. It is clear that this was a young man with a sickening and sustained interest in death and violence. He has shown no signs of remorse. The prosecution was determined to prove his guilt, and I am deeply grateful that today's plea has spared the families at the heart of the case the pain of having to relive their ordeal through a trial. Today, our thoughts are with all those whose lives were altered by what happened on that day. Most of all, we think of Elsie, of BB and of Alice, the 3 beautiful young girls whose lives were cut short, and wish strength and courage to their families who loved and cherished them. Thank you.
The angels will live on.
Yeah, and that this attack was, in the words of the CPS, meticulously planned. Of course, they would have been expecting over the next day or two to lay out exactly what they believed was at play here. They would have laid out their case to the members of the jury, what they intended to prove with the evidence that was to follow. And because they don't get that opportunity, because the trial isn't taking place, clearly they wanted to express some of what they believed is a young man with a sickening and sustained interest in death and violence. That they said, talking about the unspeakable attack, and the fact that this was the start of the school holidays, first week of the school holidays, that dance event, Carefree Innocence, the CPS saying there, children making friendship bracelets, and then the darkest horror that played out in this meticulously planned rampage, as the Doyle said. They're also expressing that relief that undoubtedly some of the families will feel that they won't have to relive that horror, that they won't have to hear the evidence, see the images from that day play out on their screens all over again, hear the very graphic details of what happened. They have been spared that. That is some relief. Of course, all of them wanted to see justice. We know Axel Rudakubana will be sentenced on Thursday here by Lord Justice Goose. He's made it clear that there is only one sentence for murder, but of course we will hear more of an outline from the prosecution about the case they had, and we may well hear victim impact statements as well on behalf of some of those. Yeah, of course, when those 2 extra charges were added in October as a result of what the police found at his home, in his family home in Banks, there were questions then about whether these were being treated as acts of terrorism, because some of the charges came under terrorism legislation. The fact that he was producing that biological toxin, ricin, which can be fatal, is produced from castor beans. It is, of course, according to that charge, an offence to have that. And the possession of that PDF, a downloaded PDF, military studies of the jihad, what's known as an Al-Qaeda training manual, the possession of that is in itself an offence. According to the indictment, he has now admitted that charge. So if the motivation for what happened on July the 29th wasn't terrorism, in the eyes of prosecutors, there will be questions about what the motivation was, but whether there were other avenues that they were investigating in relation to Axel Rudakubana. And those questions will need to be answered. I think that the police and the Crown Prosecution Service know there will be more questions about what else they learned about Axel Rudakubana, what they knew about his past. We know, for example, he'd been excluded from school for some period before this attack on July the 29th, but he was still a juvenile in the eyes of the law when this took place, although he is, of course, now 18. So those questions will remain a bit, particularly political questions, will remain about what the security services knew, for example, what was done to track Axel Rudakubana, and whether more could have been done. As we talked about, whether more could have been done on the ground that day, whether anything could have been done to stop him carrying out this attack in the first place. Yeah, and that won't be examined in court during the course of the trial, if it would have been in any case, but there definitely won't be any area of that in court now. And if you remember, it was after the peaceful vigil that happened in Southport that we saw the first of the violence just a few hundred yards away outside of a mosque in Southport that same night. And that violence and the images of that violence spawned further violent disorder across the country. And the result of that, when it was finally brought to an end, is that hundreds, thousands of people have been arrested. I know getting on for 100 have been processed here and prosecuted here in Liverpool for their part in the disorder that took place in and around Liverpool in those few days. I think the police were very aware, and at the time those other charges were laid, very aware of the potential for people to raise those questions, for that same amount of speculation and misinformation and disinformation to spread online. They're very conscious. And of course there has been a police report, a watchdog's report into the response from the police, and whether they were aware, or should have been more aware, of some of the noises that have been building for some time, particularly from the far right, and whether they should have been better prepared for what was boiling and brewing and needed just that trigger that it turned out Southport was. So all of those questions remain. For a lot of people, they remain a distraction, and there's some annoyance in Southport that still there is discussion about all of that and why that happened, when the focus should have been on those lives that were lost and those changed forever by what happened in July, and very much the focus, I think, we heard there at the end from the Crown Prosecution Service, the focus on keeping those victims and those families in our minds.